Hello guys, welcome back to the third video in this REST API series. In this very video we are going to talk more on serialization, and also we'll be creating the user profile. So once a profile to be generated for every user that is signed up in the site, so that they can update their profile to provide a profile image and other informations. Alright, so we'll be doing that with signals and Django signals. And lastly, we'll be doing something like creating something like a chef book to actually signify users that are chef and those that are not chef. Remember, when we create our user profile, when we created our user model, we specify a feed called is chef. So when a user creates a chef book, we have to change that value from false to true to actually signify users that are chef. In that case, users that are not chef cannot actually make changes to any recipes or delete any recipes that they did not create. So for you to actually be able to create a recipe in this app, you have to be a chef, you have to have a chef book. So these are the things we'll be doing in this very video. So if you're just joining us for the first time, to check the other videos in this series, and also don't forget to subscribe, to hit the notification bell, and also give this video a thumbs up. So without wasting much of our time, let's actually proceed. Alright, the concept of serialization, mind my spelling, serialization is the process of, or the idea of converting our Python, our Django object or model instance or query set, so converting those kind of complex Django complex data type into a native Python data type that can easily be rendered as JSON. So remember, our API response is always given the content type for our API response is the JSON object. Alright, so for us to actually get those complex data as JSON objects, the process is known as serialization. So serialization is simply converting those complex data type into native Python data type like string, int, and dictionary and things like that that can easily be rendered as JSON. So that process is known as serialization. While we also have deserialization, which is actually the reverse of it, when we pause our JSON object into back to Django objects that need to be used in our logic and all that. So this idea is known as serialization. So if we head over to the Django REST framework documentation on serialization, I advise you to read more of it. If you are a beginner, it's very easy to understand. So it says serialization allows complex data such as query sets, model instance to be converted to native Python data types that can then be easily rendered into JSON or XML or other content type. You understand? So it works very similar to our Django form. So when we are working with serialization, just like the way when building a Django form, you can use the form class or you can use the model form class. Also in serialization, we can use the serializer class where we have to specify the feeds that we want to serialize, just like in a form, or we can use the model serializer which map our serializer to a specific model. Alright, so when we are actually passing maybe a JSON, some kind of JSON object back or sending back with the process of deserialization, we have to first of all validate the serialized data before we can actually receive it into our database, something like that. Okay, so that's how serialization works. It's feeds that we have in our form. When we have email feed, chat feed, datetime feed, similar to that is also what we use in our serializer. So you can map your feeds like this. That's when you are using the serializer class. So another thing you need to note is when you are working with the serializer class, not the model serializer, you have to actually create some method to operate on the serializer, like the create method and the update method, in the sense that when we are receiving maybe JSON data that we need to deserialize, what we want to do, probably we want to save those data in our database, so we have to create a special method for create to create a new object with those serialized data. So you have to first of all receive the JSON data that is deserializing and validates the data then before you can save them or update. So all this we'll be doing in this tutorial. Alright, note also, apart from the serializer class and the model serializer class, we also have other special serializer class like the hyperlink model serializer, which make it very easy to work with model relationship like one-to-one relationship and foreign key relationship. So, and also we have other special serializer like the list serializers and some other custom serializers. And also we can also override so many methods in the construct of our serializer. Alright, so and then working with relationship and so many other stuff. So I will advise you to read this documentation, because there are a lot of things in this documentation that I cannot actually talk about right now because of time, but I'll try as much as possible to show you as much utilities and much features here in our code and our video. And also, when we are using the model serializer actually has a simple implementation of the create and the update method, so we can use that, or we can actually override those. Maybe if we have other things that we want to do, we can override those and make some changes to it. So apart from that, let's go straight to our code. And alright, we'll head over to our model.py file. So we're going to create our profile model. Alright, specify some feeds. So we're going to have a bow so that the chef or users can provide their bow. So this is going to be a test feed, and we can have something like a profile picture. It's going to be an image feed. Yeah, we're going to specify the uploaded will be upload_to. We want to upload to a folder called profile, so we need to actually set up a media URL. Alright, also we need to install Pillow to get this to work. So we can bring in any other feed, like let's say phone number, maximum of like 15, and lastly maybe country, and then lastly the user that hosts this profile, which is going to be a one-to-one relationship. Alright, good. Alright, so that's that. Alright, so the users that hosts this profile, the username. Then let's just create the model for the chef. We can call this chef book or chef portfolio, depends, or chef brand, depends on the name that is preferable to you. And in here we just have to maybe the name. So in this case, maybe the chef brand can be the chef, which is going to be the user. So this is going to be a foreign key. That's cascade also. Presentation, so the name. So that's good for our model. So we need to install Pillow. If we save this now, you find out that our terminal will throw up some. Alright, say pip install. Alright, so we have Pillow installed already. So another thing, we need to quickly set up the media URL, because this is an uploaded media file. Alright, so for those of you that don't really know how to work with media file in REST API, so this is an opportunity for you. So we head over to our media URL. Alright, so we can set up our media directory and all that. So we need to set up the media root. So say media is going to be our base URL, the folder we want to put in our media files. Sorry, cmd. You can use any name you want. So that will be our media root. So we need to head over to our url.py file. We need to save this and then head on other utilities like we say from Django port settings. Then want to say from Django. Alright, so in here, these are actually basic Django, so you should know this already. So you settings something to the URL pattern. Right, so we can save this file now. Alright, this to the model, we need to make all these other feeds none. We need to pass in the attribute of blank equals true, because you're going to use signals to create this, and these feeds will not be provided at first instance, only when they are being updated. So we need to set blank and null equals true. Alright, so we can save this now. I think we are good to make migration. Alright, so once we got that done, we need to run our migration now. Pattern manager migrate. Alright, so let's run our server back. So once we make a migration, we need to create the signal for this profile to be created whenever a user sign up. So inside our authentication app, we need to create the signals.py file. So see, in here we're going to create the signal to actually create the profile. So we need to make some imports. First, we're going to say from, so we need the post save. So we need to import dispatch receiver from dispatch. So we'll say from Django. We need to import our model. So we'll say from there. So we'll say user model variable. We just create a variable, right? So here we need to create the signal function, which we're going to call create. So this is going to take a couple of arguments. So we're going to, the first is going to be signal, it's going to be sender, sorry, then instance, which is the instance of the user created. This created is actually a boolean value, but we're going to put created keyword asks arguments that this function takes, and in here we need to execute the two signals used to pass the signal. So it's expecting two arguments, the post save signal that we imported and the sender, which will be the model that is going to be sending this signal. Alright, so in here we're going to say if created. Alright, we want to create the profile by saying profile.objects. Actually what we are doing here is actually saying if created, which is boolean, initially was false, but we are listening for this sender, which is the user, is the instance that has been created. So if it is created, we want to also create this model. Require parameter is the user, this is going to be the instance, and our model here we have this user, and it's actually the only required feed for now. So others are actually blank and not, so we can create this model without providing this other feed for now. We want to save this, we open the init.py file. Actually, before we do anything here, let's head over to the apps.py file. Here we're going to define the ready method to call our signals. So we're going to say define the ready. Alright, but the signal, because the signal I want to call when this app is ready. So we do this, then we'll save this, and we need to grab this app and then head over to the, here we're going to define the default app name, which is authentication, and the config we copied. Alright, we can test out our user create to see if we can to see if our profile was created along. So let's see, register this in model. Once we add this to register, so we can create a new user now. Let's create a super user. I don't think we have already, so we need to create a super user. So I have email address, I'm gonna say username, I'm gonna say name James. So the password is too similar to the email. Yes. Alright, we have our super user created. We can run our server again. If we head to our browser now, and let's first of all go to our admin, password and username. Alright, so we signed up now as our admin. If you check our profile, the profile was generated for the admin user. Alright, that's correct, it's working fine. Remember, when we finished everything, we created a super user, which was is Harry, and you can see an admin was generated for the super user. So if we go to /users, we have two users. Remember, we created users before, but this user doesn't have a profile because we created it before we implemented these functionalities, but the admin user has a profile. So let's try and create one more user. So we can decide to use this Django REST framework interface. We can use Postman. So let me use this. In this case, we want to provide a username. We can call it test save. The user was generated. So if we head back to the admin, if we log into the admin and we check the profile, we can see the user profile was generated for test user 4. So that's that. So before we end this very video, let's create the serializer for our admin. Sorry, for our profile for the profile, because we will be updating the profile. User will be able to update their profile, so we'll create a serializer for it. I'm going to create a class. We'll call it profile serializer dot model serializer. Alright, so we want to use the model serializer because we want to map everything in the profile model. Alright, so all the feeds. So for that reason, we want to use the model serializer, just like if we want to create a model form. So in this case, we're going to create another the class meta. We're going to specify the model that we want to map the serializer to, and that is the profile model. So secondly, we need to specify the feeds that are required for a user to. Alright, and lastly, we have the user, which is a one-to-one feed. Okay, so I want to use the opportunity to briefly explain how to work with relationship in REST API Serializer. So the Django REST framework actually provides a couple of ways for us to handle model relationship. By default, model relationship are represented by the primary key feeds. Alright, so like this, if we just put in the user, alright, by default, this user feed, which is a relationship to this very model, is represented by the primary key feed. So if we are to maybe use this serializer to query to get this object, is the ID of the user that will be shown to us when we use it like this. But there are other forms, there are other ways we can do it. Another thing you need to note is that when we are working with a model serializer, the primary key feed is automatically generated for us. Alright, so if we head over to the documentation, you will see just go to the documentation, go to API guide, and you go to serializer relationship. Then you see other ways that we can actually represent relationship. So I advise you to actually read through it. We can use string to represent our foreign key feed. Once you declare your foreign key feed, maybe by changing the default, by changing it to serializer.string related feed, we will use the string objects that we define in our model. That is this string object that we define here. That's if we override the primary key feed to string related feed. That is what will be used. Also, we can also use the hyperlink related feed. The hyperlink related feed will just give us a URL to the individual feeds. So the hyperlink feed may be used to represent the target of relationship using hyperlink. Alright, so you can see an example here of using the hyperlink relationship, and so that's for the hyperlink. It will be represented with the URL to the individual instance. Slug feed, if you have a slug, you can use a slug related feed also, and so many. So I advise you to actually go into this, and also nested relationship. We'll come back to that in later video when we'll talk about nested relationship. So in this case, we are going to represent our user using the string feed. So we are going to kind of override that by saying user, so string related feed, and in this case we want to set it to read only equals true. So we want to make this for display purpose, not alright. And also when we have this done, so we can just use this opportunity to create a serializer for the chef also, right? So we'll specify the class meta, use the option of auto import. So once we click enter, it will auto import it for us. So we can specify the feeds, and so we want to display just the ID of any of the chef book that was created with the name of the chef book. So these are the two items that will be displayed. But whenever we are creating a new chef object, we need to provide the user. We'll do that programmatically. Alright, so these are the two serializer that we'll create for now. We can also, in our next video, we'll be updating our user, creating the functionalities for user to be able to update their profile, so they can provide this very information to update their profile. I'm going to end it here. See you guys in the next video. So don't forget to subscribe and like this video.